She was hunted, betrayed, poisoned. Once hunted, now hunter. Welcome to Once Upon a Crime, where dark truths, lost legends, and twisted fairy tales come to light. And so her story begins. The girl they called Snow White. You now walk through the gates of Chapter 3. But if you're still wondering how it all began, Chapter 1 and 2 are tucked away in the darker corners of this channel. Years passed like silent watchers in the halls of the palace. Snow White turned 18. Gone was the grieving child. In her place stood a young woman of rare beauty and piercing wit. Graceful, commanding, with the same fire her mother once held behind her eyes. The kingdom whispered of her. Fairer than her mother, they said, stronger than her father, a queen in waiting. Even the old men of the court stood straighter when she entered the room. Even the nobles from distant lands bowed a little deeper when she passed. And the king, her father, watched her with a pride that softened the bitterness between them. Though she had rebelled, though they had shouted and blamed each other for a death neither could reverse, he loved her still, perhaps even more. He gave her everything, the best tutors in philosophy and warcraft, command over the court scholars, a personal guard, her own wing of the castle, horses from the east, scrolls from forbidden libraries. Her mind was as honed as her sword hand, her beauty matched by brilliance. And Sarah watched, from behind veils, from corners of rooms, from mirrors she could no longer control. Sarah hated it. This girl, this echo of the woman she'd replaced, was becoming something she could never be. No amount of stolen skin, no crown, no gold-threaded gown could erase the truth. The king still looked at Snow White's mother in his daughter's face. He still gave her the affection he never gave to Sarah. He never whispered to Sarah the way he spoke to Snow White in council. And Sarah, now queen in name but not in heart, despised it. She who once served the mother had killed to rise. Now the daughter stood between her and absolute power. And in Sarah's bitterness, something ancient stirred, something darker than jealousy, older than ambition. A new plot began to weave itself in her dreams, because there could not be two queens in one castle, not when the shadow of the first still lived so brightly in the girl, not when the king's true heir stood in her way. While her father believed she was immersed in philosophy, diplomacy, and the sciences he so generously provided, Snow White studied something far older, the art of observation. Body language, tonal shifts, inconsistencies. She had learned how to read people, and Sarah, the queen, was a book written in lies. She saw it in the stiffness behind her smiles, in the way her hands curled when Snow White entered a room, in how Sarah's presence changed the air, sweet on the surface, but always laced with rot. So, she waited, watched, listened. And when the guards changed and the halls grew quiet, she slipped into Sarah's chamber, wrapped in shadow like armor. It smelled of perfume and dried lavender, but underneath, something metallic, something wrong. She moved carefully. There, beneath the vanity, she found a carved box. Inside, scrolls in a language older than the kingdom. Red thread coiled like blood, dried herbs, a small obsidian dagger, and tucked into the back a painted portrait of her father, young and regal, flanked by 2 black candles half melted. Snow White's breath caught. Why would she keep this? Why is he in the center of a spell altar? Her heartbeat thundered as realization bloomed like poison in her chest. Witchcraft. Not just superstition, real, practiced, dark. Sarah had done something, was still doing something. Snow White's fingers hovered over the scrolls, just inches from truth, when it happened. A scream. It tore through the quiet halls like a blade through silk. Her father. She ran, barefoot through the corridor, her nightdress catching on corners. The guards were shouting, servants scrambling. She reached the king's chamber just as they burst open the door. There, on the polished marble floor, lay her father. His face pale, lips tinged blue. 2 bite marks punctured his ankle. Beside him, a serpent still coiled, hissing, before a guard sliced it in half. A snake, someone whispered. It got through the wall. But Snow White knew better. There were wards on the royal chamber. No ordinary snake could enter. She looked up, and Sarah was already there, not crying, not screaming, not surprised, just watching. Their eyes met, and in that one look, everything changed. The game was no longer silent. The entire kingdom wore black. Bells tolled for the king, for the man who once ruled with wisdom, for the father who gave Snow White everything except the one thing she needed most, the truth. His funeral was a grand affair, draped in mourning roses and silver-lined veils. Sarah wept perfectly, every tear placed like a jewel. She stood at the altar in a gown too fine for grief, whispering her goodbyes before the crowd. But Snow White watched in silence. Not a single tear, not a single word, only eyes that burned like frost. Stay with us for the next chapter of our tale, where Snow White takes the bite meant to silence her story, but death is not the end. In the shadows, someone finds her, Lilith, and fate, it begins to whisper a new ending. And by the power vested in Snow White herself, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tap that little bell, and who knows, you just might live happily ever after.